Hi, welcome back. Today I am here with another book versus movie review. I plan to have this video going up in February, which is Black History Month, and so this seemed appropriate. I recently did a buddy read with my friend Katrina over at the Fabulous Book Fiend, and we read Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterley and then watched the film. So I wanted to chat a little bit about the book and about the movie and similarities and differences because it was really interesting. I had a great time buddy reading this with Katrina, and I highly recommend both. I had seen the film previously. I watched it when it first came out in theaters, but this was only the second time that I had seen it, and I had not read the book. If you aren't familiar with this, it is a nonfiction account of trailblazing Black women who worked for NASA, and in the book, its predecessor, NACA, as well. So this is one place where the movie and the book diverge a little bit from each other, and I completely understand why. The book starts following women in the World War II era, where most of the work that they were doing was aeronautical on developing planes, and then moves all the way forward into the beginning of NASA and spacecraft development and these women working there. I think the title is really apt. These are hidden figures, women who were really important to the work that was being done and often got overlooked. A lot of people didn't know that this was what they did. This is the movie cover edition. The movie is fantastic. I can't recommend it enough if you haven't seen it. The acting is amazing. It's really inspiring. You really see these women doing what they're doing during segregation and the way that that affects the work that they do at NASA, these brilliant minds. So I did listen to the book on audio, and I would probably recommend consuming it that way. I have heard some people say that reading the physical book is a little bit slow to get through, and I could see that being true. I think on audio it's easier to get through the parts that are a little bit more technical, and I was less bothered by it, but I could see how maybe reading the physical book it might be a little bit slower. The book does follow the stories of more women than the movie does. Again, this is an expected choice, and I think they did a pretty good job of deciding which characters to focus on in the movie. This is well worth picking up, and the movie is well worth watching because it tells you so much about these women who laid the groundwork for other women to come after them in STEM, both Black women and white women, although obviously the focus here is on Black women. These were mathematicians, but they were called computers. It was believed to be something that women were good at, and it's not something that's really talked about, but women did most of the mathematical work. This was prior to the introduction of actual computers, which at the time when they were introduced took up entire rooms. They were massive and really expensive. And so you kind of see this transition in the book from pre-computing days to IBM computer days, and from NACA, which was focused on aeronautics, to NASA, where space travel begins to be a thing, alongside the civil rights era and segregation and the battles against that, and it is just really fascinating. So the movie follows the stories of three main people: Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, and Katherine Johnson. Dorothy Vaughan is played in the movie by Octavia Spencer, and it's interesting because in the movie, I think because the timeline is more compressed and it's later on, she is shown as a contemporary of the other two women, whereas in the book that's actually not the case. She started working for NACA much earlier on, became the manager of this group of Black women computers, and was sort of the like mother and shepherd of these other younger women, bringing them into the fold. So you get a little bit of that in the movie, but they're more shown as contemporaries, so it's not really historically as accurate, but I think they do a good job of showing her struggle to become a manager officially and get that pay increase. There is a character in the movie, a white woman played by Kirsten Dunst. She does not exist in the book. I think she was a character created for the movie, and it's pretty effective in getting across the point that they want to get across of the struggles that she did really deal with, but in a way that's easier to portray on screen. The thing that is so impressive, though, about Dorothy Vaughan, which is something that actually happened, is she continued to reinvent herself over time. She started out as a computer, she became the manager of the computing group, and then when they started bringing in these IBM computers and she realized that it was only going to be a matter of time before that was dismantled, she made herself indispensable by teaching herself computer programming so that she could reinvent herself as a person to help program these computers. And you do see this happen in the film of Hidden Figures. I think it's really inspiring and powerful. And in the book, we get a little bit of her later in life, of things where she had hoped to be able to do more in research and was disappointed that she didn't have the opportunities that she had hoped for. But regardless, I think she was really inspiring as being the first Black female manager, officially given that title, and she also was instrumental in beginning the careers of so many other Black women who went on to do amazing research work. So even though she maybe hasn't been known as well, she made so many valuable contributions with her own work, but also in her helping other women be able to do the work that they were able to do later on. Mary Jackson was played on screen by Janelle Monáe, and she worked as an engineer, which was a really, really big deal. Much like you see in the film, she got a special dispensation to attend these classes held at an all-white high school. I think she was the first Black woman engineer, because to get the title of engineer, there were certain courses that were required that you could only get at a segregated white school. And so you see that in the film, where she goes to a judge and makes a case and gets a special dispensation, the only Black woman in this class of mostly white men. And just the courage that that must have taken is so inspiring. But she knew what she wanted, she went for it, and she made it happen, even in a time period where that was really, really difficult to do. And finally, we have the story of Katherine Johnson, played by Taraji Henson. And oh man, like, it is so crazy to watch the scenes in the movie where you just feel the weight of what segregation and discrimination meant in the workplace. She is assigned to this working group that's pretty much all white men, many of whom don't see her value initially, but she has this brilliant mathematical mind and eventually goes on to author research reports, which was a really big deal, because getting credit as a woman, as a Black woman, for the work that you're doing was not something that was necessarily a given. And so you see the power of her slowly changing the minds of the people around her just by the work that she's doing. Some of the specifics in the movie are a little bit different from the book, but I think they effectively paint a portrait of what things were like. In the movie, for example, the men in the office with Katherine make her use her own colored coffee pot instead of their coffee pot, which is not something that's talked about in the book, but is definitely the sort of thing that she may have run into. It is also true that there were specific bathrooms for colored women, and many of them were not located in the building that she worked in. In the movie, we see her literally running across campus to try to make it to the bathroom and back, which is something that probably some women did do. Katherine, in the book, just basically decides to ignore the signs and use the white women's restrooms anyway, which props to her. So I do like the way that they handled it in the film. I think it does a really good job of displaying the ridiculousness and the problematic nature of segregation, even in things like restrooms. One thing that did happen in the book, which we see in the film, is there was a scene where one of the women was asking where she could find the restroom, and white women said, well, why would we know where your restroom is? And yeah, I mean, it's crazy, guys. Like, these women who are highly educated, really brilliant in these, yeah. Anyway, so it's crazy. One thing that I thought was a really interesting story that took place in the book that wasn't shown in the film involving this issue of segregation is in the cafeteria where they ate lunch. There was a specific table assigned for the colored women computers, and there was a sign that said colored girls on it that was on the table. And one of the women, every time there was a new sign, would take the sign and put it in her purse and take it away. And then a couple weeks later, there would be a new sign, and she would just kept repeating this over and over until finally, maybe a year or so later, they just stopped putting out signs altogether. And it was her kind of like small act of rebellion against this to try to make it a more welcoming workplace. So I thought that was a really interesting and compelling story, which you find in the book. That wasn't something that they put in the movie. So overall, I would really recommend reading the book and watching the movie. I think they both have a lot going for them. They are not one-to-one. There are things in the movie that didn't actually happen in the book, but I think the adaptation is powerful in demonstrating the point of the sorts of things that happened rather than maybe the way they actually happened in great detail. And the book is a little bit more expansive. You get more women talked about, you get a greater time period, you get a little bit more detail into the sorts of things that they were studying and involved in. And yeah, overall, I just think it's fantastic. I'm really glad that I read the book and rewatched the film. It's something that I will probably continue to watch again in the future and share with my kids as they get older. I just think it's really powerful, and that these are stories that we should be celebrating. So talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts on this, if you guys have seen the movie or read the book, if you have anything to add to the conversation. Question of the day, is there anything that you're planning on reading or watching in celebration of Black History Month? If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.